like, subscribe, and share weekly updates with a scary moment. The White Lady. In a remote province of Vietnam, there lies an old highway known by the locals as Ghost Road. Over the past decade, numerous mysterious accidents have occurred here, claiming lives in inexplicable ways. Whether during the day or night, the road carries an unsettling atmosphere, one that has birthed a notorious legend. The White Lady, Nguyen Minh Dung, a seasoned truck driver, never paid much attention to these rumors. He had been driving across Vietnam for years, delivering goods from city to city. To him, ghost stories were mere superstitions, old wives' tales with no basis in reality. That night, like many before, he prepared to drive along this so-called haunted road to deliver a shipment to a village located many kilometers away. The only shortcut was to take this notorious highway, but Dung saw no reason to worry. It was a particularly gloomy night. The sky was thick with dark clouds, and not a single star or moonlight illuminated his path. Lighting a cigarette, Dung took a deep drag and steeled himself for the journey ahead. Just the wind and shadows playing tricks on people. He muttered to himself, pressing his foot down on the accelerator as his truck sped towards the eerie highway. Around 2 a.m., Dung reached the most infamous stretch of the road, the one that passed by an old cemetery. His truck's headlights flickered over the graveyard, briefly illuminating the crumbling headstones and overgrown grass. Just as he was about to drive past it, something caught his eye. A woman stood by the side of the road. She was dressed in a long, flowing white gown, her figure barely distinguishable in the dim light. Her face was obscured by long, dark hair, making it impossible to see her expression. She stood completely still, as though waiting for someone. A strange feeling washed over Dung, but he quickly brushed it aside. Probably just someone lost, he thought, slowing down and pulling his truck to the side. He rolled down his window and called out to her, "Miss, what are you doing out here? Do you need help?" The woman slowly lifted her head, revealing a face that was deathly pale. Her eyes were empty, devoid of life, and her lips trembled as though she wanted to speak, but couldn't. A shiver ran down Dung's spine, but he maintained his composure, chalking it up to the cold night air. "Are you looking for a ride? I can take you," he offered. Without a word, the woman nodded slowly and began to walk stiffly toward the truck's passenger door. She moved unnaturally, as if her joints were stiff, and slid into the back seat without uttering a sound. Dung couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, but he forced himself to keep driving. The woman sat silently behind him, head down, her long hair obscuring her face. The truck continued to barrel down the road, but the air inside felt heavy, oppressive. Dung glanced into the rearview mirror, hoping to catch another glimpse of his passenger. To his horror, her figure was fading, slowly disappearing as though she were melting into the shadows. Cold sweat ran down his back, and panic overtook him. Without thinking, he slammed the brakes, causing the truck to screech to a halt in the middle of the road. He whipped around to face the back seat, but the woman was gone, vanished without a trace. The truck was silent, save for Dung's ragged breathing. The back seat was empty, as if the woman had never been there. Just then, a faint sound reached his ears, the sound of soft sobbing, close, almost right next to him. Terror gripped him as he threw open the truck door and stumbled out onto the dark road. Standing in the cold night air, his heart pounded in his chest. The world around him seemed to close in, the distant graves barely visible in the dim glow of his headlights. Despite the overwhelming fear, Dung told himself he had to keep going. He tried to rationalize what had just happened. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or my mind playing games on me, he thought, trying to calm his nerves. Determined to break the eerie silence that hung in the air, he climbed back into the truck and started driving again. To distract himself, he decided to speak to the woman, even if she had seemingly vanished. "Where do you need to go?" he asked, his voice a little shaky but firm. There was no answer. The back seat remained eerily quiet. Dung, unable to resist, glanced at the rearview mirror again, but this time, the reflection was gone. The woman had completely disappeared, as if she had never existed. His heart pounded in his chest. Dung slammed on the brakes once more, his truck screeching to a stop in the middle of the desolate road. This time, he jumped out of the vehicle, not daring to look back. He stood on the roadside, the quiet of the night amplifying the thudding in his ears. A cold wind brushed past him, and as he looked around, his eyes were drawn to the nearby cemetery. Amid the headstones and wild grass, he saw a figure once again. It was her. The White Lady was there, hovering near an old grave. She knelt by the weathered stone, her body shaking with sobs. The image of her ghostly figure, cloaked in sorrow, was too much for Dung to bear. He wanted to run, but found himself rooted in place, as though something in the air was holding him back. "Who are you? What do you want?" he finally shouted, his voice trembling. The woman slowly lifted her head, her pale face twisted in pain. When she spoke, her voice was soft, like a whisper carried by the wind. "I want to go home, but I can't remember where home is." Dung's stomach dropped. The reality of the situation hit him like a brick. The woman wasn't a living person. She was a lost soul, trapped in the place of her death, unable to find her way to peace. Her sorrow, her confusion, they all stemmed from the moment she had died. "Are you the one buried here?" Dung asked hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman didn't answer but gave a slow, sad nod. Then, in one fluid motion, she stood up and started to walk away. Her form grew fainter and fainter until she completely dissolved into the night air, leaving Dung alone once more. Dung's hands shook as he pieced it together. This woman had died in an accident, her spirit forever tied to the road. She was the reason for the many unexplained accidents that had taken place there. Her soul was stuck in limbo, searching for something she could never claim her life. The following day, Dung couldn't shake the image of the White Lady from his mind. He sought out the village's oldest resident, Grandma Tran, a wise woman known for her knowledge of local folklore. After listening to his account, her face grew grim. "The woman you saw," she began, "was likely Nguyen Van. She was a young girl from this village, and her life ended in tragedy. About 10 years ago, she and her fiancé planned to elope. They were going to start a new life together, but they never made it. She died in a car accident on that very road." Dung felt a chill run down his spine. He never expected the White Lady to have such a tragic backstory. Grandma Tran continued, "Her body was never properly buried, and her family never honored her memory. Her soul couldn't rest, so she wanders the place where she lost her life, looking for a way home." Dung understood now. The accidents on the road weren't just coincidences. They were the result of her restless spirit, trapped in the moment of her death. Her despair, her longing for closure, had manifested in the haunting of the highway. "What can I do to help her?" Dung asked, desperate to put an end to her suffering. "You need to help her find peace," Grandma Tran replied solemnly. "Only by performing a proper ritual will her soul be able to move on." With the help of a local priest, Dung arranged for a ceremony to be performed near the old grave where the White Lady had appeared. During the ritual, they chanted prayers for her soul, lit incense, and offered her belongings from her past life: a photograph, a hairpin, and a small locket, hoping to connect with her spirit one last time. As the ritual progressed, the air seemed to shift. The tension that had long lingered around the road lifted, and for the first time in years, the highway seemed calm. Dung felt a strange sense of relief, as though the White Lady had finally found her way home. In the days following the ritual, the once infamous stretch of highway became noticeably quieter. There were no more sightings of the White Lady, and the number of accidents dropped dramatically. It was as if the curse had finally been lifted. Dung, now a firm believer in spirits and the supernatural, couldn't help but feel a sense of closure himself. He no longer dismissed ghost stories as mere superstition. The experience had changed him deeply. Every time he passed by that stretch of road, he would silently say a prayer for the White Lady, hoping that in the afterlife, she had found the peace and happiness that had eluded her in life.